Hello, hey, Hawkeye fans. Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. Got 5 hours sleep, showered, ready to go for today's Friday morning YouTube podcast. We kind of planned on this anyway. Kennington Smith, uh, felt like it was. We haven't, uh, felt like we should do a podcast after this game. We either win or lose because it was a big game. Iowa, Michigan, of course. It ends up being the second straight Thursday night instant classic. The Hawkeyes win 93-84 in overtime. I'm actually going through. It's right above me here. I'm going through the process of rewatching the game now, and just so much to like about the way this team came back to win. What stood out to you most as you step back now about 12 hours after this game ended?
Yeah, I think the thing that stuck out to me was just the flip of the switch in terms of intensity, specifically on defense, really stuck out to me in the final stretch of like the last 8 minutes and into overtime. All night long, Iowa offensively shot the ball well enough to win. When you're shooting over 45% from the field, you're shooting about that percentage from the 3-point line, and you know what Iowa does offensively, you could just look at a blind box score and say, okay, you feel like Iowa is winning this game. But they just, couldn't get those defensive stops in a string to overcome that hump from Michigan for almost, 80-90% of the game. It felt like Iowa was right there. They would get to two, Michigan would hit a three, and then Michigan would get up seven. Then Iowa would close the gap, and then Michigan would hit another shot. And it just felt like they weren't going to be able to get that one big defensive stop. But credit Fran McCaffrey for the lineup change, and then that group, kind of stabilized things. And then I'm going to, again, that last 8 minutes and into overtime. So that 13-minute stretch, Iowa scored Michigan 31-15. They only held them to one made field goal in overtime, 12% from the field. So once they got into overtime, I mean, they had seized the momentum at that point and then just carried it over, into that overtime where they led wire to wire. So that's where I would start, was just, it was just a really gritty performance where you just kind of felt like they tried and tried and tried and tried, and they just couldn't get over the hump. And you felt like, okay, valiant effort, but defensively there wasn't going to be enough there, and they were going to take a tough loss, and they just found a way to, just keep fighting it and push through. So again, another slugfest. I feel like that's becoming like a buzzword. I know I've used it a lot in my stories, where it just like feels like every single game that Iowa is in is just like this heavyweight fight where they're just exchanging body blows for hours. And Iowa's finding a way to win these type of games, which is going to be really critical down the stretch. I mean, Iowa's not out of the woods yet in terms of being on the bubble for the NCAA tournament. And they're going to face, game rest of the regular season, especially when they get into the Big Ten tournament in that time of year. So to be able to lean on those experiences and know that they are capable of winning games like this is my big takeaway.
Yeah, good stuff. Every night in the Big Ten is going to be like this. I mean, we saw Minnesota win at Ohio State last night. I mean, that's the absolute worst team in the conference. Iowa doesn't even get Minnesota at home this year. The single play. You thought if there's one team that's bad in the conference, it's Minnesota, and Iowa doesn't even get them at home, and they just went on the road to beat Ohio State, a very, very good team, a top 25-ish team. And so there's not going to be any nights off. So all these games are going to be, I mean, you can't get too high or too low with one result. But right now, the Hawkeyes are riding a high with 3 straight wins. It almost feels like 4 straight wins the way they came back against Indiana. I mean, it felt like they were 0-4, in the first half of that game. And all of a sudden, they're 3-3 in Big Ten play. So they've evened it up. And that leads us into our first topic. We're going to kind of get back to our kind of 3 down, 3 topics type thing here, Kennington. And let's just kind of talk about, the question is, how did Fran get these guys back on track? Obviously, a really tumultuous week with his son, Patrick, stepping away for anxiety last week. I mean, that wasn't very long ago that this happened. That was just 10 days ago when Patrick sent out that tweet. It's hard to believe. It seems like it's been a while now. And this team has hit a brand new gear, obviously. And we were talking about this actually walking out. We were the last 2 out, except for the cleaning crew.
Wow.
And we were just talking about this. We were both kind of marveling at the fact that Fran McCaffrey just he gets his players to play so confidently. And there's no greater example. Actually, you could almost, I would say, let's go with two examples. Payton Sandfort and Josh Dix last night were guys that, for lots of good reasons, could have been, in the gutter mentally this year. After Sandfort struggles, Dix's injury, and I mean, those two guys, I mean, they were basically in the lineup the whole time, and Sandfort obviously was the hero of the game. I mean, I think you have to give Fran a lot of credit for getting his guys to play so confidently. And then you could even say the same about Rebraca and, of course, Chris Murray, playing at an otherworldly level. Just want to point, I mean, beyond the 27 points and 8 rebounds, his passing and ability to run the offense, Chris Murray playing at such an elite level right now. But Sandfort and Dix, I mean, let's talk about those two guys and just, I mean, talk about it, Kennington, what you see in terms of these guys just playing with no fear
Right.
all the time.
Yeah, I think it was telling last night in the post-game presser when Payton Sandfort said something to the effect of, everyone around me knew that it was going to click at some point. It was just a matter of kind of getting there. It never seemed like within the program there was any type of worry about what he was going through. And I feel like that starts with Fran at the top, and that mindset trickles down to the rest of the team. And Fran talked a lot last night about his recruitment of Payton and what he saw from him on the showcase circuit, on the AAU circuit, throughout high school, even throughout last year. He has this unwavering trust in Payton's ability, particularly shooting, which he should. Obviously, he has a very proven track record of being a really good shooter and a really good offensive player. And Fran understands that even though he was in a slump, Iowa was going to need him this season if they get to where they want to go. And you could say the same for Josh Dix as well. I think that there is some potential for him to kind of carve out a Payton-esque role that he had as a freshman last year, where he's not going to be needed every single game. There are going to be a lot of games like, you look at these past 3 games, he's only played 15 combined minutes. So there's going to be games where, on the road, tight game, Fran's going to rely on his vets. And there's going to be some games where he might need a spark off the bench, and Josh Dix could provide that, similarly to how Payton did last year. But just like you said with Josh and his injury, I mean, to be where he is, it feels like it's almost close to a year since that injury at this point. I know he suffered it, sometime in the spring last year. To be where he is now, playing 31 minutes in a high leverage game. I mean, the amount of trust that Dix put in Fran and the coaching staff and the medical staff to get him back to playing at a high level, I think, is worth talking about as well. And you mentioned a lot of players. I would even throw Riley Mulvey into the mix as well. Somebody who, enrolled early, and he's kind of had, a lot of ebbs and flows since he's been in the program. And, Fran is just not giving up on him. And he's consistently said throughout pressers, I'm going to continue to, give Riley chances, and we're going to need him. And it hasn't played out that way yet. Iowa hasn't gotten into a lot of foul trouble, but last night they found themselves in a pinch, and Fran put Riley in there for 13 minutes. And a lot of that is, Riley having to play good enough to stay on the court that long. But, Fran had the confidence to put him out there. And there was a moment in that second half, early in the second half, where Rebraca gets the third foul, and we're looking at each other and we're like, okay, decision time. Like, is Fran going to ride it out with Rebraca? He could get a fourth really quickly, or is he going to put Riley in the game? And Riley played 7 minutes in the second half and provided enough stability for Rebraca to come in there and finish it out in the end. So I would throw him in the mix as well. So that's probably, from what I've seen, probably Fran's most distinguishing trait as a coach is just the belief that he instills in his players. And you can see that, on the court, almost in every game.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Riley Mulvey because that was it was telling how long he was willing to ride with him in the second half. And I think we're going to get to a little bit more looking ahead with Iowa hoops in our second segment, so I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But I think you can now feel like, for the first time last night, I felt like I thought to myself, hey, this Riley Mulvey could be a player for this team at some point. It kind of seemed like he was fading to the background, but good for him. And then just Payton Sandfort. I mean, I, I feel like this is probably going to be carried away, but like he looks like an NBA player to me. Like he look quick release, deep range, long rebounds. I mean, just a impeccable teammate. Also, I mean, on top of all that, Chris Murray playing himself into the NBA lottery. Payton Sandfort, he's probably. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him to test the waters this year. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I'm just saying he's playing. He looks like he is that type of player, like a Wieskamp, where you can count on him for those big moments, those big shots and deep range. And man, what a huge development for this team, for Payton Sandfort to crack out of this slump and to do what he's doing. And we said all along, Chris Murray needs supporting cast between Rebraca, who eventually comes off the bench last night and finally produces. He was at 4 points, I think, when he came off the bench, ends up with a 14 and 12, finished strong. And then, of course, Sandfort with 26, Murray 27. I don't know, just really like this team right now. It's a really fun team.
Yeah, the vibe is it's just different than what it was, a few weeks ago. And I don't know how many players it's been, but it's been at least 3 now that have mentioned the word swagger. Like, we've gotten our swagger back and we're kind of feeling like ourselves again. I think that at this point, you can definitely look at the 2 things kind of like at one time. Like a lot of things were happening at once. So, they lose Chris Murray after the Duke game to the foot injury. Then they come back and get the big win over Iowa State, but then they have the the OT loss to Wisconsin, then the loss to Eastern Illinois, and Stanford's going through his slump. And then now we know, that Patrick was fighting a personal battle as well during that time. Then they have a few losses, in the late December and early January. There was just a lot going on. It kind of just had a team in a funk a little bit. And I'll go back to Patrick's decision, and you kind of referenced, that and the potential, the effect on the team. During Iowa's availability, this is I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday. This is what Payton had to say about that. He said, I think Patrick being public about his anxiety opened it up a lot of conversation and opportunity for us to come together. We love him and we're doing everything we can to help him. So I think that was, a galvanizing point for the team as well. They're just playing with a lot more motivation and a lot more fire right now, which is what you wanted to see. And I don't think that, at this point, anybody can question the resolve or the toughness of this team. And this is a team that, again, they're playing really well right now, and they have, won 3 games in a row. But this is a team that can still improve on a lot. And there's a lot, left on the court that this team can kind of, pick up, and they can put all these things together. Then you're starting to get really excited about the potential of this team. I know that we both voted Iowa in the preseason top 5 in the preseason poll. That prediction was looking.
Wasn't going to talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Wasn't looking great a few, a little while ago. But, I think this is a team that, they put everything together. And, when Patrick comes back, if this team is still playing at a high level, I think you could be potentially looking at a top 5 level team in the Big Ten when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I'm going to call up the Big Ten standings right now. I got the game on above me, and then we just saw the Philip Rebraca goaltending. There was a lot of stuff we didn't end up writing about that could have been post game topics.
Right.
I'm looking at the standings now. I mean, Iowa's 1 game out of 3rd place in the Big Ten. Rutgers is 4-2. Iowa 3-3. Northwestern 3-2 in the Big Ten. Iowa gets Northwestern on Wednesday. We're not really standings counting now, but it's just sort of goes to show you, like, Iowa's playing itself right back in to the thick of this race, potentially even for a double bye in the Big Ten. So that leads us into our second topic, Kennington, which I facetiously, comically, whatever you want to say, put as our question. What would be the upside? One of our favorite phrases from the last year. What would be the upside for this team? And you kind of started to talk about it. The Hawkeyes net ranking now up to, I think it was 38 this morning, moved up 2 spots, and Michigan even moved up a spot to 77. So, the Hawkeyes are right back into where they need to be to contend for a tournament spot. Still a long ways off, but I think let's look at just the roster now. I think one of the things that kind of piqued our interest last night was Fran McCaffrey saying he's been working Josh Dix at point guard in practice. And, we were like talking about that privately after the game. It's like, okay, well, he has seen what we talked about on our radio show this week. Perkins, Ulis, and Bowen, that they're searching there. And so it looks like Fran has identified a solution potentially. More Josh Dix. And he capably ran the point, 10 points, 5 assists. But you're still going to need those other guys. So maybe talk me through what you think the deal is with Perkins. He is just really cratered in terms of production. I feel bad for him. He's trying. His shots are just way off. He got kind of chewed out after defense last night. And defense used to be his thing. He used to come in and get those spark plays on defense. So we're just not seeing that. And then, of course, Bowen's not getting a much run. But when he does, he's kind of hit or miss. And then Ulis, to me, is, kind of you get what you expect sort of from him, which isn't a bad thing. But again, we're talking about what would be the upside. So I talked about everyone there. What strikes you out of that question?
Yeah, I'll start with Tony because I feel like of the possible solutions there that you're looking for in the backcourt, he is the one that kind of has that. He has like a little bit of everything that you're looking for. He has the experience, he has the physical makeup, he has the scoring ability, he has defense. He knows how to play make with the ball, and there is tangible evidence of him doing this at a very high level, going back to the end of last season and the early part of this season. It really seems like since the Wisconsin game, he's really just been struggling from the field. And there have been like a few good moments sprinkled in there. I think the Penn State game was an example of where he was aggressive and doing some good things, but otherwise hasn't been shooting the ball well. So I think just getting him back into the fold, getting him back into a rhythm, getting him, re-engaged will probably be the top priority. The Dasonte Bowen thing is interesting because Josh Dix said after the game that the thinking behind it is moving him to the point to create some opportunities for Bowen off the ball, and maybe get him going a little bit offensively. He is like so good in transition. Like he just has like no fear, and he just doesn't even think about in transition. He's able to easily score. He really just hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities in terms of a lot of minutes to really see what his floor could be. I think I said that on the radio show. Like his highs are really high and his lows are really low, but it hasn't quite been established exactly like where his floor is at. So the question that I would have in regards to Dasonte Bowen is how many minutes would you have to play him, and how much consistency would you have to do that with to establish kind of what his floor would be. So it's kind of in an interesting spot where there is a bit of a logjam there, at the point guard spot. You do have a lot of options, a lot of veteran options. He's just trying to find his way. Like I feel very confident about his potential, but just right now there is a bit of a challenge in trying to find the sweet spot for him in minutes. Aaron Ulis is really solid. And I thought that he was pretty solid, last night. I don't think that he really did anything that would warrant any type of concern. But I think Fran just ultimately rode with the hot hand, which was, Josh Dixon and Payton Sandfort down the stretch. So I'm not really sure if I answered the question per se, but I guess like where I'm kind of ranking it is, getting Tony reestablished is definitely the top priority. Yeah. I'm not too concerned about Aaron because his floor is and what he can do is very much established. So I think that he's going to be consistent. I think he's going to provide good minutes whenever he's into the game. I mean, the Rutgers game, he played 20 minutes. He rarely turns the ball over, good free throw shooter, willing defender. And then Bowen is just kind of like the X factor. Like, is he going to be, afforded the opportunity to play an extended run of minutes so we can really see what he can do, on the court? Yeah, I saw that comment.
One of our YouTube commenters, it flashed up on our screen here as we broadcasted. And, having fun with my last faux pas on Josh Dix, and I'm a little worried that Ray Gun T-shirts followed me on Twitter last night. I don't know if I want that on a shirt with my name attached to it, but anyway, yeah. Josh Dick's minutes are a good thing right now for the Hawkeyes. But we're going back to the earlier conversation. I want to wrap up basketball here so we can get to football. But we talked about Fran and getting the most out of his guys, getting him to be confident. That's his project right now is Tony Perkins, I think, because if you can get him back to where he was or even close to where he was at Seton Hall. I mean, Seton Hall game, you think back to that. I mean, he was just tremendous. And Iowa needed him on the road to win those games. And he's got that mentality to take you on the road. So that's kind of the next project, but I feel like he's really brought these guys back. And then do I open this can of worms now? But I guess let's do it quick. Is it time to put Payton Sandfort in the starting lineup? I know the starting lineup doesn't mean a ton, and Fran probably will not change. But I think you almost have to start preparing for when Patrick does come back, and assuming he does, because you can't really have Payton and Patrick come off the bench. So, do you just put? I don't know. Is it time to put Sandfort in the starting lineup, Kennington?
I'm going to say no for now. I think that is going to be an interesting development down the stretch. But I just feel like what he's providing off of the bench right now is just, really valuable. I think it was kind of like, the thing with at the beginning of the season with like Connor McCaffrey, where it's like, okay, could you put him in the starting lineup? Like, yes, you could, but what he means to the bench unit right now is just too valuable. And that, like you said, he's going to be coming off the bench, but he's ultimately going to be playing starter minutes. I'm more so going to be looking at kind of what the lineups are down the stretch of games and kind of what the minutes rotations look like going into the second half. But I would keep the starting lineup the same. Like you said, the thing right now is establishing, what the backcourt can give to the team. And it's actually it's honestly pretty remarkable that they've been able to reel off these 3 wins in a row without, that kind of projected backcourt production. I mean, the front court has been outstanding these last, 3 games. And, you're going to continue to get that good production from the front court. So I'll keep the starting lineup as is, continue to develop Payton off the bench, continue to try to develop some more consistent bench pieces behind him, Josh Dix, Desante Bowen, potentially even, Riley Mulvey, if, Iowa continues to get into some foul trouble. And then if you feel like you have good answers behind, Payton Sandfort, then I feel like you can start adjusting the, the starting lineups and adding guys to the bench. But right now I feel like he's most valuable in that 6-man / starter minutes type of role.
Yeah, and he's a selfless guy. I doubt he minds that much. And I guess I'm kind of agreeing with you as I listen to you there, because it's just nice to, if things aren't going well, to have a guy like him to plug in off the bench. And we've seen that's a nice tool to have. And we saw that with Keegan Murray as a freshman. It was like, why don't you start Keegan? Well, it was kind of nice to have him off the bench. And, same with Chris Murray last year. It was kind of nice to bring in a guy like that off the bench. I think that's cool. All right, let's get to football, Kennington. We continue to wait on Iowa football coaching staff news. There are lots of developments nonetheless in this program. Obviously, the big news yesterday was that the Swarm Collective pulls in a $500,000 commitment from Elite Casino Resorts, and that's the one in Riverside at a Rhythm City out in the Quad Cities, I believe. And man, what a nice stroke of genius from Brad Heinrich, the unpaid CEO of the Swarm, who's gone head to head with Barta for no pay, doing this because he's a Hawkeye fan and loves it. Give him a huge heaping dose of credit here for doing what he's doing. And it's going to be a battle. But let's talk about that quick before we get to OCs. I think it's a huge deal, especially. I mean, it's casino money, and that's
right.
That's good. That could, maybe that goes up eventually. But I'd like to see some like promotions at the tables. Like buy 100 in chips. Get a bonus 10 chip to put on a Swarm Collective little thing on the blackjack table or whatever, and all that money goes to the Swarm. I don't know, but anyway, just it's an interest. It's a wild place in college sports right now where you got casino money coming in and lots of it.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the Swarm. Like, And I don't know if it happened exactly this way, but in my mind, it's funnier if it happened this way. Like, okay, Iowa Athletics doesn't want to give us, access to the donors. F it, we're just gonna get 500K from a casino, maybe even more. Like that's what they're supposed to do. And I want to give a shout out to Jeffrey the Greek, who is a very prominent voice on Twitter, who we were going back and forth about the collective in the midst of this, like, contested whatever with athletics. And he said something to the effect of, I work in sales. Like, if you're going to let one hurdle or this hurdle, that hurdle affect what your production, then you're not going to be working in sales very much longer. And that's what the Swarm is doing. Like, okay, Iowa Athletics isn't being as compliant as we would like them to be. We're just going to go get money from other avenues. We're going to do this thing our way. At some point, Iowa Athletics will probably fall in line, but if they're not, we're still going to do our thing. So $500,000 is a lot of money. Like, that is not, something to turn your nose at. That's a significant investment. And we've heard Brad Heinrich talk before about how much money the Swarm needs. That is going to be huge. I also, this might be something, it might be nothing. I brought this up to you before the game. Interesting that it was only the basketball coaches in the photo. Maybe Kirk Ferentz was on the road recruiting or whatever, but I think about basketball. Like, when I saw Lisa Bluter and Fran at McCaffrey as the only two coaches, it just made me think about basketball and the amount of money that is going to be needed in basketball through the portal, especially on the men's side. I mean, we heard Fran himself talk about his efforts in trying to bring in a big man. But Iowa was just, they're just getting outbid by their competitors and they weren't able to bring anybody through the portal. So I see this upcoming offseason. I know we're off the basketball talk, but I look at this offseason upcoming potentially as a very busy one in the portal for Iowa men's basketball potentially. And to be able to kind of have an NIL war chest behind them, I think is going to do them better in this upcoming cycle than it did in the last one. So those are just kind of my wide ranging thoughts. But I mean, any shortcomings that Iowa's having, right now, that, in the portal, recruiting, whatever, it is not because of a lack of effort from the Swarm Collective. I mean, they are doing everything that they can to make sure that Iowa remains viable. So you have to tip your cap to them for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff there. And I'm glad you brought up basketball in that because, yeah, I usually mentally think of it as football, but obviously it's all three: football, men's basketball, women's basketball. Yeah, a lot of money there, and good stuff. Let's talk about the offensive coordinator, kind of as the other half of football. What as we wait, other things are happening around the country, Kennington, and I kind of want to tee this up for you because this is something I've heard on national podcasts. I mean, it's a major story what's happening at Clemson with Dabo Swinney getting rid of his offensive coordinator. I'll let you kind of tee it up from here, and then we'll get to how that ties into Iowa football.
Yeah. So, for those who, don't fully know my background, obviously I grew up in Georgia and I am a Georgia alum, but I spent a few years in South Carolina covering high school sports, 30 minutes from Clemson. I have spent time around that program and did some reporting on them when I ended up on the Feinbaum show a few years ago. Dabo Swinney is somebody who very much similar to Kirk Ferentz and kind of how Iowa does things from a staff perspective. I mean, he has some of the longest tenured assistants in the country on his staff. And last year, he lost his two top assistants. Tony Elliott, offensive coordinator, went to Virginia. Brent Venables obviously went to Oklahoma as the head coach. And people were looking at Dabo and saying, okay, Clemson's a premier program. You're a premier coach. You like to build things up, but you have an opportunity to go and get a quote unquote big fish as an assistant. And he decided to promote from within and hire someone named Brandon Streeter. And Brandon Streeter, for those who don't know, is somebody who played at Clemson, somebody who Dabo was a coach when Streeter was a graduate assistant. So this is somebody who's grown up in the program, but is very young, didn't have a lot of experience. Dabo makes him the offensive coordinator, and people were questioning that move. And he kind of did the, I know what I'm doing. I'm betting on us. I know we have in our facility very similarly to what Kirk Ferentz did. And Clemson, they made a New Year's Six bowl and they won the ACC this year, but they finished 48th in total offense, which for them is really low comparatively to what they've done in years past. And Dabo got a lot of criticism throughout the year. your coordinators aren't doing their job. You're going to fall behind. What are you going to do? And he said he's going to do an evaluation at the end of the year. And that evaluation led him to firing Streeter yesterday. And he immediately had another option in Garrett Riley from TCU as the offensive coordinator. So I'm saying all of this to say that even on a national level, there are coaches who are facing similar criticisms to Kirk Ferentz. And Dabo Swinney is also somebody who does not go into the transfer portal very often, and he is not a huge proponent of NIL. And he's been called stubborn, on a national level, just as much as Kirk has from on a micro level here, in Iowa media. So it's happening a little bit everywhere. And I think that, if you've seen the reaction, a lot of people are giving Dabo Swinney a lot of credit for he didn't necessarily admit that he was wrong by hiring from within, but I think his actions are telling you that he knew that Clemson had to do something in order to remain viable nationally, because the margin for them and their expectations are razor thin. So I'm not going to, make it seem like Iowa and Clemson are on some type of, one-to-one operating plane here, but it's happening a little bit of everywhere. So that just made me raise my eyebrows a bit, like, okay, that's somebody who Dabo obviously has a lot of, affinity for, and somebody who he held close to him, but he understood that he had to make that move for the betterment of the program. So where does that, leave Iowa? We don't know. It seems like, as the days goes on, anxiety is growing in the fan base about what exactly is going to happen. And I think that, this is going to be, a huge decision that kind of affects the trajectory of Iowa's program, kind of which way they go here.
Yeah. And, I sent you a tweet today from Braylon Allen at Wisconsin. I think he sent it yesterday. He goes, not going to miss those 9-man boxes. I mean, Wisconsin, another example of a program that rarely changes. And that I just got an email from Iowa that says they're reducing prices, reducing the cost of season tickets down from $425 to $335 next year. So that's a pretty big reduction in what Iowa is charging for season tickets next year. So interesting. There's this change around us, nationally and locally, and what will Kirk Ferentz do? Obviously, we constantly get asked that. I think we just have to be transparent. I do expect changes, but I also don't know what the news is yet. We don't know. We're not hiding it from you. Kirk, been told, they're not ready to do it. And then when you talk about, what are they doing? Well, just Tuesday, all the coaches were up at Jack Campbell's grandfather's funeral. I mean, there's other stuff going on right now, and the portal's still open. The recruiting, it's a live recruiting period. So, Kirk Ferentz has a plan. We'll see what it is, and we'll have to be patient. But just you can see what's happening around, and there's pressure building, I think, for Iowa to do something in regards to the offensive situation. And we think that something's going to happen, and we'll get to you when it does. I wish I could tell you exactly what's going to be. I don't know that for sure, and Kennington doesn't know that for sure. And I think there's still factors that Kirk Ferentz doesn't know, especially as there are more dominoes to be turned over in the coming days. So anyway, I'm just in agreement with you, Kennington. I don't really have much more. Any final words? We got to get going.
One thing I'll say is something to look out for. I don't think we're going to have another podcast before this date. But January 18th, which is on Monday, or is that a Monday? Maybe it's a little later than Monday.
Wednesday.
I believe that's the last day for players to enter into the transfer portal, but that does not mean that the window is closed to add players from the portal. That's an important distinction.
That's a good distinction. I'm glad you mentioned
last day to enter, but not the last day to add players. And looking at Iowa's Office of the Registrar, I believe January 30th is the last day for enrollment for the spring semester. So there is going to be a window where Iowa can still add players. It is going to be a bit of a challenge, obviously, to vet guys, get them on campus, try to get them committed in a 2-week span. But it is not it's not impossible to do so. Like, they're not handcuffed in doing that. So just a few important dates to look out for as we enter further into the spring.
Thanks, Kennington. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone for joining us on this Friday morning podcast. It was a lot of fun. I'm gonna watch the end of this Iowa basketball game again from last night. Thank you for watching. Kennington Smith, Chad Leistikow, Des Moines Register. Plan is Tuesday radio show next week. Tuesday radio show 6 to 7 on KXNO. That'll be our next podcast with the Hawkeyes playing Northwestern at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. Kennington, I'll see you Sunday, 3:30, Carver Hawkeye Arena, Iowa versus Maryland. We didn't really preview it much, but another big game.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. I mean, if you're into the Ken Palm rankings, Iowa and Maryland are like on top of each other. So that's going to be.
I'm into them.
Yeah, they're that's going to be a big game. And like you said, Northwestern is much improved. So Iowa's gaining some momentum, but like I said earlier in the show, they're far from out of the woods. So they got to continue this level of execution.
All right, thanks, Kennington. We will talk to you all later. Take care.